Today on the Transplant Helper, I'm going to be sharing with you 7 things you must be aware of before you begin a long-term high-dose regimen of that corticosteroid Prednisone, aka the devil's drug.
Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community.
Hey folks, welcome back to Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and yes, once again, here I am. I'm bad-mouthing Prednisone. Okay, now, as a disclaimer, let me say up front, oftentimes when you're placed on a drug, corticosteroid like Prednisone, you're obviously being given that drug for some reason. And for some point and to some extent, you must always weigh out the risk versus the benefit right there and see if it is actually worth it. And in most cases, Prednisone can be a life-changing, even life-saving medication that can be absolutely necessary, at least for a time. However, it does not come without its side effects. Things that are included in that are things like headache, extreme fatigue, problems with blood sugar spiking, dizziness, lightheadedness, weight gain, you name it, heartburn. There are so many things that oftentimes come along with as a terrible side effect or a series of side effects to Prednisone, most of which really come out in the terrible mood swings and the attitude that you may have toward others in your life while you're on that medication. I've done a number of videos on that, looking at it from really one perspective and another and even another, and perhaps you've already seen some of those, and that's why you may have stumbled across this video. So let me ask you before we go on any farther, if you have enjoyed any of my content in the past, or maybe you believe you might even enjoy today's video, how about give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button beneath this video, perhaps even the bell notification, and you can receive future videos and more information that I hope to provide you, which I hope can help to advocate, educate, and motivate you, particularly if you are a transplant patient. However, again, back to the subject at hand and talking about that corticosteroid Prednisone, it is the truth. It is the case. Been there, done that, have the card to prove it. It can cause problems longer term, even after you've been taken off the medication. And today I have a comment I want to read to you that proves exactly that fact and just reiterates what I've known for quite a while. Now, this comes in from a user. He's got a kind of a longer username here, so I'm not sure of the name. It looks like Lethal Force 3, kind of, sort of. But anyway, here's what it says. It says, "Hey, mate, thanks for the vid. If you see this comment, please let me know your thoughts." He says, "I have not had a transplant, but was on 25 to 50 milligrams of Prednisone for 2 years." He explains why. Then he says, "Then I was tapered over the next year and whilst having to go back up and down a lot. Anyway, the issue I'm having is basically water retention. Even now that I'm off the steroid and I'm off of it, I have been off of it for about 8 weeks, and the swelling and water retention, the muscle aches, the pains, the joints, the joint pain and such are pretty bad." He says, "I'm exercising, I'm eating a low sodium diet, and generally looking after myself, but just wondering if anyone has had a similar experience." He says, "The water retention is the hardest thing to me to deal with, especially in my face, my stomach, and my legs. I don't want to be prescribed a diuretic. I just wonder if anyone else has had a similar experience." Well, to this user right here, I can tell you up front, yes, I have had a similar experience. I know exactly what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, I've actually been off Prednisone for a number of years at this point, and to an extent, I still have some of those issues. Particularly for me, it has to do with my blood sugar spiking a little bit, as well as, yes, I do have some of the water retention, I would call it bloating, that sort of thing, that often does occur in my belly and or my face. For whatever reason, I've got bird legs, so I've rarely had any swelling in my legs or ankles, but I know right where you're coming from. And unfortunately, being as you state here in the comment, you've been off of this for, I think, about 8 weeks. You're probably not nearly over the hump yet. I can tell you it may go on for a while. It will get much better. It will be the fact that this is something that just kind of pops up for a moment and goes away. I think it'll get much better if you can stay off the medication, particularly since you are, yes, you're eating a good diet, you're trying to exercise. I think you're doing everything right. However, if you see in the next, say, 2 to 3 months that you are still having these issues, it would be my recommendation, and you may be willing to do this right now, but my general recommendation recommendation is I would go and see the physician that prescribed that to me and really kind of get a once over, kind of get a checkout, because these things can linger for a while, and they often do, but it doesn't mean they have to. And I, like you, I would probably try to avoid the diuretic if need be. However, sometimes diuretics can be given a little bit short term to get you over a hump, and then you'll in turn do a little bit better later than that. But I would go get checked out. It could be, and it often is, that these corticosteroids, things like prednisone, can do some damage to your liver / your kidney. Therefore, that may be what's happening. You may be retaining fluid now, not because of the medication, the drug itself that you've taken in the past, but now it may be that there is a little bit of damage been done to those kidneys. So you doing what you can with your diet, being sure you're staying well hydrated, all that can help. But I would want a doctor to help you to manage that so that you can have the best success possible with that. Now, with that being said, I want to share with you these 7 precautions. I don't know what else to call them, but 7 precautions that I would always be aware of when it comes to taking long-term high-dose corticosteroid. Now, just for memory's sake, every one of these are going to start with the letter S, okay? So think about the letter S, like the one on the screen right here, to kind of key you in into each of these things. Number 1, the first S that is associated every time with prednisone will be the idea of being swollen, okay? Being swollen. It is part of the game, just like you just mentioned in your comment. It is part of the game that you're going to gain weight, that you're going to get that moon face, kind of that chubby-looking, chubby cheek, chipmunk face. That's just part of the game. Prednisone does that, and oftentimes is related to that. Now, I have met people, because I've been associated with so many transplant recipients who, most all of us, at least in the beginning, are on a high dose of prednisone. I met with some that deal with a lot more than others. I met with some that within a matter of 2 weeks, they get that moon face. They look like a totally different human being. And then others kind of more normalized. Now, I, looking back, thought at the time that I began prednisone that the moon face wasn't really happening to me. But now, as I look back at some of those old photographs, I've got one just right behind the camera over here on the wall. Wow, I was a chunk, no doubt about it. Fluid in my belly, fluid in my cheeks, a little bit in my legs. Again, got those bird legs, so not quite so much. But I would always be aware and be prepared that there will be some swelling or some fluid retention that will come along with this drug. So that's the first S. Number 2, I would consider the word sepsis. Now, don't be afraid of the word sepsis. The word sepsis is just kind of doctor talk for an infection, because while you're on that corticosteroid, prednisone, you're at a quite a bit higher risk of infection. So things that are going around in the community, colds, flus, viruses, COVID, unfortunately, anything that's going around in the air, because this steroid is in the back end kind of weakening your immune system a little bit, and that may be the intention of it for a transplant patient. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. But because it is weakening your immune system, you can be more susceptible to sepsis or infection. So just watch out for that. The little things, you get a little nick on your hand or a cut on your foot or whatever, watch out. Make sure you take those things clean. Make sure you keep some antibiotic ointments, whatever, on them, whether it's internal or external infections. You are susceptible to those, so be real cautious with that. So that's the second one. Number 3, I would think about sugar. Okay, again, there will be blood sugar spikes, particularly when you're on the higher dosage. I was basically, and most are, in the beginning at a higher dosage of this, you can be put into what would be considered basically a diabetic type of state, where my blood sugars typically right now are normalized. They run around 100. That's just the way it is. I feel pretty good when they're between 80 and 100. While on prednisone, those things would spike. I mean, they would be out of this world sometimes. Typically, basically just running through the day, I would have 250, 300 type of blood sugar measurements, glucose measurements. Not any fun. You don't want to get into that, but that's what prednisone can bring and does bring most of the time. So just be aware of that. There can be issues with your sugar. Next, I would say skinny. And by skinny, that doesn't that don't really go along with the fact that you're going to be swollen and bloated and all. But when I say skinny, a lot of times you can shrink as far as your muscle, the makeup of your muscles, the size of them, and even your bones, because you begin to deteriorate. Some of those muscles get weak. They atrophy. That's the fancy word for the fact those muscles are shrinking and those bones are shrinking. So we're not talking about the steroid like someone would take to go to the gym to try to get buffed up and blown up. We're talking about a steroid that kind of does the back opposite of that, and that is it can cause your bones and or your muscles to kind of shrink. So be aware of that. That's just another one of those things that are involved and a precaution you need to be aware of if you're taking high-dose long-term prednisone. That's that one. Now, in the very next place, I would talk about sight as in eyesight. And this is a prime example right here. I was that guy in my family, the only one in my family, as a matter of fact, who basically went his whole life, never needed glasses of any form. As a matter of fact, a few different times through the years, I would get concerned about that because everybody else in my family wore glasses. And if I had any problems with my eyes at all, I would rush out to the ophthalmologist or whatever you call that, the eye doctor, and I would be checked. And they was always walk away saying, Jim, you have 20/20 vision. You have the vision of an eagle or whatever. They would say everything's fine. I would get no glasses. But then after my heart transplant, when I got put on those high dose, long-term corticosteroid, that prednisone, my eyes got bad really quick. Now, one of the suggestions I always add to that is if you're placed on prednisone and your eyes do get bad, your sight goes bad, even though it's no fun, don't panic initially, okay? Because while you're on the medication, you can get poor eyesight. You come back off of it. Oftentimes, most times, things recover. Particularly if it's not long-term, things can and do recover from that. So don't panic immediately. And I generally suggest to people if they get put on prednisone to try to hold off. Try to wait about 6 months to a year before going to the eye doctor, because if you don't, you may go into the eye doctor, they change or put on prescription, and then before you know it, you're on that for like 6 months, you're off prednisone, and now your eyes are all out of the whack. The glasses are useless. So I wouldn't suggest going to the eye doctor for about 6 months to a year. But it may be that you need to go like I did. I went from that perfect 20/20 eagle eye vision to needing glasses. And at this point, without these glasses, I can't read. I can't do anything like that. I was really okay with the not reading thing. I'm not a big reader. But at the moment I could not see my supper plate in front of me and identify the food items, I was ready to go. So I wear these glasses right now, and they're actually fairly strong. They're actually progressive trifocal lenses. So yeah, it went downhill fast. Some of that's age related, I get it, but an awful lot of that came down to the prednisone itself. By the way, it can also cause cataracts. So I don't have cataracts, but it can cause or lead to that. So you want to go and see an ophthalmologist or an optometrist. There's the other word. If you're on prednisone, but give it a little while, let things balance out, and then go from there. Now, number 6 in this list, I would think about the word slowly, okay? Slowly. And I'm just saying the word slowly because if you're placed on prednisone, really to any degree, the proper way to go on it and to come off of it is to taper in both directions, particularly on the latter end. Prednisone is certainly one of those medications, if you're put on it by a physician, obviously by prescription, he and or she need to be prepared to help you and assist you to taper off of it. And it needs to be a long taper. Now, that's no fun. When I was on 50, 60 milligrams of prednisone a day, the only thing I wanted in life was to get off of it, to get away from those side effects, to stop being the Incredible Hulk of my home and offending everybody that came into my path, even being mad at myself half the time. I wanted off of it, no doubt about it. However, a proper tapering of this medication is extremely important. To some extent, if you come off of this too quickly, your body goes into kind of a withdrawal from the medication, and it can be horrible. As a matter of fact, even though I did taper, I went from 50, 60 down till about the last 6 months. I took only 5 milligrams of the medication. When I came off within 2 weeks, I was calling my doctor saying, please put me back on prednisone. I was feeling horrible. I had no energy, just a lot of things. Some of the side effects, like this person was talking about 8 weeks out, some of those things were coming back on me. They were still there. And so be sure that you taper off or slowly taper off of this. Never, ever, ever stop this medication very abruptly, okay? And then the last S in the list is the word stress, okay? Don't be surprised at all if your body is under a lot of stress in this time. Now, I'm not talking about just this leading to the mood swings and things like that. Yes, it will. But the thing is, you're going to be stressed. You're going to be stressed not only for what caused you to get on the medication. In my case, it was a transplant, a heart transplant. In other cases, it's trying to treat some skin condition or some other issue. There's going to be a lot of stress there. And this medication will increase that. Everything in my life, emotionally wise. seem to be hypersensitized, okay? I would be very, very happy at one moment, very, very sad at the next, very, very angry at another, and the next moment, hey, everything blowed off me like water off a duck's back. You just can't ever tell. Those mood swings can be horrible and terrible, and the stress that is placed on your body can be pretty high. Again, are these side effects and these things that I mentioned, are they terrible? Yeah, they can feel that way, but sometimes these medications, the risk and the benefit, they're just more to it. You just have to have it. So that's the things I would be cautious of. These are the things I would be on the lookout for. I'll rename those: swelling, sepsis, sugar issues, being skinny, having trouble with your sight, slowly tapering off, and stress. Those are things you need to be aware of and or watch out for in this case. Again, thank you so much to this user. Let me go back to that, to Lethal Force 3. Thank you so much for reaching out and kind of reminding me to talk about this. I want to ask each of you, if you're in the comments below, and I hope you'll get in the comments below, share with me your experience of being on prednisone, whether it's the fact of things that you're dealing with while you're on it or maybe while you're off of it especially. Did you have issues? If so, how long did that last? And what, if anything, could you do to help to improve that? I think really this user is doing the best thing: eat right, drink right, try to be right. But at the end of the day, I'm afraid to tell you, things are going to linger for just a little while. But watch out for these precautions. Be aware of this coming up front. I think that's the best thing. If you know what's coming, it's easier to handle when you face it. Until next time, stay stronger, my friends.